In a move that has sent shockwaves across the nation, President Donald Trump made a decision that challenges the very balance of power between Washington, D.C. and the states. In early June of 2025, he ordered 2,000 National Guard troops into Los Angeles. This was not a request, it was a command. He federalized California's own Guard members, placing them under his direct control. This action was taken without the consent or even the consultation of California's Governor Gavin Newsom. The president used a special authority, known as Title 10, to justify his order. This power is typically reserved for extreme situations like natural disasters or widespread violent insurrections, making its use in this context highly controversial and honestly, virtually unprecedented in modern times. The deployment came after several days of tense protests in Los Angeles. The demonstrations were originally sparked by large-scale raids conducted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which led to numerous arrests. As tensions rose, some protests escalated into confrontations with law enforcement. There were reports of blocked freeways and property damage, including the burning of several autonomous vehicles. Citing this unrest, the Trump administration declared that federal intervention was necessary to restore order. However, critics, including state and local leaders, argued that the situation was being intentionally exaggerated by the White House to create a reason for this dramatic federal overreach. Governor Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass immediately condemned the president's move. They described it not as an effort to help, but as a deliberate escalation designed to provoke a larger conflict. Mayor Bass called the deployment a chaotic escalation, suggesting it would only make a tense situation worse. The core of their argument is that the National Guard is, under normal circumstances, a state-controlled force. It is commanded by the governor to respond to local emergencies like earthquakes or fires. For a president to seize control of a state's guard against the governor's will is seen by many as a violation of state sovereignty and a dangerous step toward centralized power. The sight of federalized troops on the streets of an American city, deployed against the wishes of its elected state leaders, has raised alarms far beyond California's borders. This action has transformed a local issue into a national crisis, pitting the federal government against one of its largest states. The legal and political fallout was immediate, creating a showdown that touches upon fundamental questions about the American system of government. The conflict is not just about protests on a city street. It is about who holds power in the United States and what limits, if any, exist on a president's authority to use military force within the country's own borders. The response from other states was swift, unified, and overwhelmingly critical of the president's actions. In an extraordinary display of solidarity, all 22 of the nation's Democratic governors joined together to stand with Governor Newsom. They co-signed a powerful letter addressed directly to President Trump, denouncing his deployment of the National Guard in California. Their message was clear and direct. They viewed the president's order as a dangerous and alarming abuse of power. The letter accused the administration of creating a manufactured crisis to justify an unprecedented federal intrusion into state affairs, a move they believe threatens the rights of every state in the Union. This united front of governors, which includes influential leaders like Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, has been called a blue firewall by political analysts. Their collective action sends a signal that this is not just a California issue, but a national one. In their letter, they did more than just criticize, they made a firm demand. They urged the president to immediately withdraw all federalized guard units and to show respect for the long-standing principle of state sovereignty. This principle holds that states have the authority to govern their own affairs without undue interference from the federal government, a cornerstone of the American constitutional system. The governor's letter highlights a deep fear that if the president can federalize the National Guard in California without the governor's consent, he could do the same in any of their states. They believe it sets a dangerous precedent that could be used to intimidate political opponents or suppress dissent anywhere in the country. Their unified stance is a political gamble, openly challenging a sitting president and drawing a clear line in the sand over the issue of states' rights. They are essentially warning that an overreach against one state is considered a threat to all of them, and they are prepared to fight back together. This coalition represents a significant political obstacle for the White House. It demonstrates that any attempt to expand federal power in this way will be met with organized and powerful resistance. By framing the issue around constitutional principles rather than just partisan politics, The governors are appealing to a broader audience concerned about the balance of power. Their letter is not just a statement of support for Governor Newsom, it is a declaration that they will defend the autonomy of their states against what they see as a serious encroachment by the executive branch, setting the stage for a prolonged political and legal battle. Adding a powerful and nonpartisan voice to the chorus of criticism was retired Major General Randy Manner. As the former acting vice chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Manner has deep expertise in the Guard's structure, mission, and relationship with both state and federal governments. His opinion carries significant weight because it comes from a place of military experience, not politics. He publicly condemned the president's deployment as an inflammatory overreach, a choice of words that underscores the potential for the action to make a bad situation even worse. He warned that this move was not just constitutionally questionable, but also strategically unwise. General Manner explained that the National Guard's greatest strength is its connection to the communities it serves. These are citizen soldiers who live and work in the places they are sworn to protect. When a governor calls them to respond to a flood or a wildfire, they are seen as neighbors helping neighbors. However, when the president federalizes them and sends them into a community against the will of local leaders, that essential bond of trust is broken. The Guard risks being seen as an outside occupying force rather than a part of the community. This, he argued, undermines the Guard's effectiveness and its standing with the public. The general's warning went beyond the immediate situation in Los Angeles. He stated that the president's action should alarm every citizen, regardless of party. This is because it sets a dangerous precedent for the future use of military power within the United States. If a president can decide on their own to deploy troops to a city to handle protests, it opens the door for that power to be used for political purposes. His critique aligns perfectly with that of legal scholars who question the use of Title X authority in this case, noting that the conditions on the ground in Los Angeles did not meet the high threshold of insurrection or rebellion that such an order typically requires. The significance of General Manner's statement cannot be overstated. When a respected military leader questions the legality and wisdom of a military deployment, it provides crucial validation for the political leaders who are opposing it. It signals that there is unease not just among politicians, but also within the military and defense establishment itself. Reports from Washington suggest that some officials at the Pentagon and within the National Guard Bureau share these concerns, having urged restraint. General Manner's public rebuke gives a voice to those concerns and reinforces the idea that this is a serious constitutional issue, not just another political squabble. In response to what he has called a manufactured crisis, Governor Gavin Newsom is not just fighting back with words, he is taking the battle to the courts. California has filed for a federal injunction, a legal action aimed at immediately blocking the president's order and returning control of the state's National Guard to the governor. This lawsuit argues that the president has exceeded his constitutional authority and has infringed upon the rights reserved for the states. The legal challenge sets up a high-stakes confrontation that experts believe is almost certain to make its way to the Supreme Court, given the fundamental constitutional questions at its core. The central legal question is about the limits of presidential power under Title X. While the president does have the authority to federalize the National Guard, that power has historically been used only in the most extreme circumstances, such as enforcing federal desegregation orders in the 1950s and 60s or quelling a massive riot. California's lawyers will argue that the protests in Los Angeles, while disruptive, did not rise to the level of a rebellion or an insurrection that would make such a drastic federal intervention legal. The White House, in turn, will likely argue that the president has broad discretion to determine when a situation threatens national order and requires federal action. This conflict forces a national conversation about the nature of American federalism. The system was designed to create a balance of power between the federal government and the individual states. The National Guard has always existed in a unique space, serving both the state and the nation. However, it is fundamentally a state-based force, with governors serving as the commanders-in-chief in nearly all situations. If the president can seize control of this force at will, it dramatically shifts that balance, giving the federal government more direct power over domestic affairs and weakening the autonomy of the states. Ultimately, what is at stake in this showdown is more than just control over 2,000 troops. It is about the rules that govern American democracy. Does a president have the authority to use a state's own military force against the wishes of its people and their elected governor? Who decides when a protest becomes an insurrection? The answers to these questions will have lasting implications for the relationship between the White House and every state capital in the country. As the case moves through the courts, the nation will be watching, because the outcome could redefine the limits of presidential power for generations to come.